Hey guys! Welcome to my channel. For anyone new to the channel, nice to see you here with us. I post anime what if videos either never heard before, or reboot into a more clear audio. Today, I present to you all, what if Deku was a Viltrumite? Izuku's father is the most powerful person on the planet. For years, he waited for his own powers to kick in. But once they did, he never could have imagined the cost of them. If you like this video and want to see more, make sure to like and subscribe to see more anime what if stories. Hisashi wasn't always a fan of walking. It did its job, taking him from one location to the next. He couldn't complain about that. His issue lied in how slow it could be. If he went to a place quickly, walking wasn't always the most speedy way to do it. That is why he much preferred flying. Thankfully, he had even gotten a permit to allow him to fly from location to location. Of course, getting that permit also came with other difficulties, most of having to do with weaker heroes, but he wasn't too worried about them. It wasn't like they had any power over him at all. Hisashi cleared those thoughts out of his head as he descended towards his apartment. He took a moment to check himself in the window. His mustache and goatee were immaculate just like his clothes. If he was coming home to one of the most beautiful women in the world, it made sense for him to look just as good. Opening the door, the sight that greeted him was his wife tearfully sitting at the kitchen table. Hisashi immediately stiffened. "Inko? What is it? Didn't you get my messages, Hisashi?" Hisashi tried his best not to fold under her question. "I was under the Pacific Ocean. There was a giant squid causing trouble for the fishermen, and no one else was able to DEA Inko's side." "Right, I should have assumed you were working. It's just... Inko," Hisashi warmly said as he tossed his cape on the couch and warmly held his wife's hand. "What happened?" Inko sighed. "I took Izuku to the doctor today." Hisashi kept his face neutral as he pressed on. "What did he say?" "He said that Izuku won't receive a quirk. At this point, the chances of him getting one are almost zero. And he isn't taking it very well." "What do you mean? What is he doing?" "He was crying on the way home, and now he's just in his room. I don't know what to say to him." Hisashi smirked. "He's crying? Seriously?" "Hisashi." Inko chastised her husband. "Don't say it like that. He's upset enough as it is. Izuku's upset that he might never become a hero now." Hisashi frowned when he heard that. It was true that the doctor didn't know the full truth about Izuku. So he couldn't necessarily blame him for doing his job. "I'll talk to him." "Hisashi? I need to tell him the truth. Once he knows what he is, he won't be upset by this anymore." "I thought you wanted to wait." Hisashi sighed. "That was my original plan. But you don't want to see Izuku upset, and quite frankly neither do I. Telling him the truth will be the best way to cheer him up." Before Inko could stop him, Hisashi had already opened the door and entered his son's room. Closing the door behind him, Hisashi saw Izuku sitting down on his bed. His eyes W and puffy. Sighing, Hisashi sat down next to his son. "Your mother told me what happened. Are you alright, son?" Izuku shook his head. "I have the bone. I'm quirkless. I can't be a hero anymore." Hisashi didn't understand the bone part, but that might have something to do with biological differences. His son wasn't entirely human, after all. Which, as a matter of fact, was something he should now clear up. "Now who said you couldn't be a hero?" Izuku looked up at his father with confusion. "Huh? What do you mean?" "Izuku. You may have noticed that I'm not like other dads. I think it's time I told you why." Izuku cleared the tears from his eyes. "You mean why your quirk is so different?" "Sort of. You see, I don't actually have a quirk." "What? But that doesn't make sense. I've seen you do so many things." "That's true. And the reason I can do all those things is because of where I was born. Izuku frowned. His father had told him that he wasn't born in Japan. But he never said anything beyond that. Where are you from? Hisashi smiled. Millions of light years from here. I was born on a planet called Viltrum. Izuku's eyes widened. Viltrum? Yes. It's a planet that rests in a solar system very similar to Earth's. Viltrumites even look very similar to humans. Except for our abilities. Izuku was starting to understand the path his father was leaving. Your powers are something you're born with? Exactly. I knew you were smart, Hisashi said with a back pat. Viltrumites all have great strength and speed. And one of us can fly. All of them? Yes. And that includes you, Izuku. Don't forget, you're half Viltrumite. And we have something called dominant genes. Dominant genes? It means that if we have offspring with another species, the resulting child will become more Viltrumite over time. It's why I'm not surprised that you didn't get your mother's pee, just means that you'll have to wait a while before you get mine. The moment he heard those words, Izuku immediately lit up. His previous gloom washed away by excitement. You mean I'll be strong like you? And I'll be able to fly? Without a doubt. There were some late bloomers on Viltrum. But don't worry. Once your powers kick in, I'll make sure you know how to use them properly. Hisashi hugged his son's shoulder to move him closer. You and me, son. We'll be the most powerful duo on this planet. Izuku's smile was infectious as he wrapped his own arms around his father's waist. Hisashi, a man who didn't often show emotion, was delighted by the display. It helped solidify loyalty and connection to him. And Hisashi knew that when the day came, he and Izuku would bring glory to the Empire. Izuku woke up hoping to be floating out of his bed. He was disappointed when he felt his pillow on his head. Just like yesterday. And every day for the past decade. Today is still not the day. Izuku remembered the talk he had with his father all those years ago. Back when he was 4. It had been a decade since then, and he still hadn't developed his powers. Lifting himself out of bed, Izuku put on some clothes and walked out towards the kitchen. His mother was alone making breakfast. Hi, Mom. Where's Dad? Inko turned to see her son. Good morning, Izuku. Your father is in Greece, I think. Something about a sea monster. That made sense. When normal heroes couldn't handle an issue or were too focused on civilians, calling Omni-Man was a good way to deal with problems. And if he thought it was his time, Omni-Man wouldn't hesitate to come help. Do you know what time he'll be back? It's hard to tell sometimes, Inko said as she steamed both the rice and vegetables at the same time. He might make it back before you leave. I wouldn't. Knock knock. It was at that moment that Hisashi, wearing his red and navy blue costume, walked through the front door. His hair and his cape were still wet. I hope I'm not late. The Kraken was a little more difficult to deal with than I expected. I swear Earth has a problem with sea monsters. Every few months I'm fighting a new one. It wasn't too hard for you, right, Dad? Izuku asked, his eyes burning with curiosity and admiration. An admiration that earned a smile from Hisashi. Not at all. I just had to find the right spot to punch. It was incredibly easy after that. Now. I don't want to hear about sea monster fights at the breakfast table. Inko said, interrupting them both. You can discuss your little adventures later. Izuku has SCO and you have work to do, Hisashi. You should both eat up. Actually, I'm going to need a shower. Sea monsters leave a bad smell. Not so fast, Inko said as she dropped Izuku's plate in front of him and went to her husband. Come here. Izuku couldn't see them kissing, but he could hear the smooching and moaning. It was an awkward place to be. I can go to school without eating. I don't think I would mind doing that. Really? Don't be so childish, Izuku. Most kids would be happy to see their parents being together. Not that close, Izuku muttered in response. He quickly drank the rest of his soup, along with chewing the rice and vegetables. I'm heading out to school now. I'll be back late. Hold up, Izuku, Hisashi said as he turned his body to face his son. I noticed your shoulders slump. I keep telling you not to worry. Rather than being cheered up, Izuku was just upset that his father noticed. He didn't want to make a big deal of that fact. It's fine, Dad. I'm alright. I've told you. Even the latest bloomers on Viltrum would get their powers before what would be their 18th birthday. Mixed race or not. We just have to be patient. They are due any day now. Izuku nodded half-heartedly. I understand, Dad. I'll keep waiting. I'll see you after school. Inko turned to her husband to face her. Hisashi, you shouldn't get his hopes up like that. You saw how disappointed he was when he didn't get a quirk. Do you want to put him through that again? Inko, I'm not trying to set him up for anything. What I said was true, beings with even a quarter of Viltrumite blood will gain our powers. Some just get them later than others. Izuku will get his abilities any day now. Inko sighed. She had her own reservations about her husband's words, but she kept them to herself. Let's just hope you are right. I don't like seeing our son upset. Neither do I, Inko. Don't worry. I'm sure things will be fine. As Inko went to prepare her own breakfast, Hisashi eyed the door his son left. His eyes were narrowed. Izuku never had any luck making friends. Since he didn't get a quirk at 4 years old like everyone else, he was left as the quirkless nobody no one wanted to associate with. The last time he had friends was when he was 5. Back when Kaken was at least willing to keep him around. Before the incident at the lake, Izuku tried to push down his feelings as he sat down in his seat and pulled out his notebook. He opened up to the last page he had been working on. The one that focused on the newest heroes so far. Kamui Woods. His quirk is his wooden body. He can control and adapt his body to different situations. Being wood, he is weak against fire. But I wonder. Shut it, nerd. I don't want to start my day listening to your shitty mumbling. Izuku immediately shut up and tensed up when he heard that voice. He looked up to see the red-eyed spiky-haired blonde boy glaring at him. Oh. Sorry, Kaken. I didn't realize I was muttering. I'll try to. I said shut up, nerd. Keep making noise and I'll blow up your face. Bakugo lifted his hand and created sparks of explosions to emphasize his point, which prompted Izuku to quickly close his mouth. Even with other students in the class, no one did a thing to help Izuku. They were all busy either focusing on their own quirks, talking to each other, or they were just straight up ignoring him. Even Bakugo was ignoring him now, sitting back while others praised him alright. Everybody quiets down. Get to your seats so we can begin class. It takes a while, but everyone does eventually sit down in their spots. Once they do, the teacher brings out a stack of papers from his briefcase. So the school wants me to tell you about this now, since graduation is only a few months away now. All of you will have a choice after middle school if you want to pursue higher education or join the workforce. What these forms are for is. The teacher gave up halfway through his sentence and tossed the papers away. Ah, who am I kidding? You're all going to try out for U.A, aren't you? The class erupted into confirmational cheers after that. Every single person in the room used their quirks to display their excitement. The kid with a wooden plank for a face keeps it up and down. The kid with detachable eyeballs held them in his hand. The girl with fingers made of confetti kept throwing a lot of it out. And all Izuku could do was silently hold up his hand. Closer to him, Bakugo was chuckling. Do me a favor, teach. Don't lump me in with these losers. I'm the only one who was going to make it into UA. Not stuck at the bottom like the rest of these rejects. The class quieted down once Bakugo made his own impromptu announcement. Most of them were annoyed. How do you get off saying that? We have a chance too. That's really uncalled for. Bakugo took their complaints as a challenge. One that he laughed at. You extras should just shut up like the rejects you are. The best you'll ever be are mentioned in my story. Bakugo stood up on his desk to make himself more imposing. And to literally stand on his pedestal. I already aced the mock test. I'm the only person here with a shot to make it. And I'll definitely be the best hero there ever was. I'll surpass even All Might. Even Omni-Man yo, yes. It seems Midoriya also applied to UA. The room became deathly silent after that piece of information was let out. Creepily, silently, every pair of eyes in the room turned to Izuku. And every person abruptly exploded into laughter. Midoriya? Really? He can't get in just by studying. Fanboying isn't a quirk, you know. There's no way they'd take a quirkless kid. I'm not quirkless. Izuku tried to explain himself. But his anxiety along with the constant jeers made thinking harder than usual for him. And there are no rules against Q anymore. I could still dash boom ahh. Izuku jumped out of his chair just as his desk got blown up. Bakugo was standing over him with a smoking hand. Deku, have you forgotten what you are? You're below these rejects. You're quirkless. What makes you think you stand in the same ring as me? I am not trying to upstage you or anything like that, Kaken. I just want to be a hero too. Stop being delusional, you stupid nerd. It doesn't matter if you take the test. You're as worthless as you are quirkless. What can you do? Izuku, unfortunately, did not have an answer to that. Not yet, anyway. All right. That's enough, the teacher said, waving a paper around to get the attention back on him. As entertaining as this is, I will have to report the damaged desk. If neither wants to get into any more trouble, I suggest you sit down and pay attention. We still have a lesson for today. Growling, Bakugo went back to his desk. He mumbled something about a shitty old man. Izuku went back to his desk too. Izuku wasn't able to focus on the lesson all that much. So he instead focused more on his journals. Right now he was on his 14th, and he was revising the notes on Kamui, except that this time, he was mindful not to make a sound. He didn't want any more attention on him. The rest of the day passed by uneventfully. No one talked to Izuku, but that was normal. That's why focused on his notebook the entire school days. Right now, he was looking at a picture he had drawn when he was little. It was something he saw on the news and drew in all of his notebooks. His father and All Might were shaking hands. It was something Izuku constantly asked his father about, even if he didn't get an answer. Something about respecting privacy. Izuku's musings were cut short when the notebook was snatched from the desk. Ha! Kaken! The hell are you looking at now, nerd? Bakugo took one look at the drawing. He sneered. You really still look up to these old geezers? Don't you realize that I'm going to be on top of both of them someday? I mean, I admire them both. I just remember that time they were on the news together. Izuku didn't really know how to word his thoughts. His father had always told him their powers and origins a secret. He didn't want either of them to be known as aliens until the right time, so he said, well, that's all they're going to be once I reach the top. Old news. But you, Deku? Bakugo said as he crushed the notebook. You won't ever be newsworthy. Boom Kaken. Izuku couldn't only watch in desperate hopelessness as Bakugo blew up his notebook and tossed it out the window. Do yourself a favor and give up, Deku. Without a quirk, no one is going to give you the light of day. Bakugo rejoined his two friends to go to the arcade, leaving a distraught Izuku behind. Izuku found his notebook in one of the ponds outside of the school. Surprisingly, it wasn't in terrible condition. Most of the pages were still legible, despite being burned and wet, but Izuku was too upset to be able to feel relief. Bakugo's words kept ringing in his head. Do yourself a favor and give up, Deku. Without a quirk, no one is going to give you the light of day. The thing was, Bakugo was right. In this superhuman society, the only way to gain recognition and acceptance was to have a power of your own. Even a weak quirk was better than none. Otherwise, you were exempt from everything. The worst part was that even if Izuku wouldn't have a quirk, the powers he could disguise as a quirk hadn't come in either. Izuku's father had always said that his Viltrumite abi were bound to kick in eventually, but it had been more than a decade since he had first said that. And despite all of his father's assurances, Izuku was beginning to doubt if he would ever get his powers. And if he did, it might be too late. Most of the best hero schools only accepted teenagers. There were some courses you could take as an adult, but those were rarer and nowhere as prestigious. And none of them were UA. All Might's alma mater and the best hero school in Japan. All Might was the greatest hero in Japan. Probably the second greatest in the world. And one of Izuku's idols, one of the two men he has looked up to all of his life. And without any sort of power, Izuku had no hope of being like either of them. It was that line of thought that guided Izuku towards Dagoba Beach. It was a place Izuku used to go with his family a lot. Back when the beach was actually inhabitable. Nowadays, there was too much trash to even recognize it as a beach anymore. Everything from candy wrappers to junk refrigerators, people started to feel free to just dump and garbage that they could find onto these sands. So of course Izuku would go there when he was upset. He felt right at home amongst the garbage. I'm never going to be a hero, am I? Izuku sat down on the sand as that thought kept coursing through his mind. It wasn't a thought he wanted in his head. It wasn't one that he relished or even liked to consider. Be one that was getting stronger every day. And today it was especially palpable. UA might accept a quirkless student, but never into the hero course. Even if I make it in, I won't make it in. Izuku tried, he really tried, to fight back the tears. But he wasn't able to stop them from flowing down from his eyes and onto his face. Snot and mucus dripped from his nose with no way for Izuku to stop himself. All he could do was wallow in his own sadness, sitting down by himself on a beach. Suddenly, there was another emotion coupled with Izuku's sadness. He was angry. This isn't fair. It isn't fair. Izuku kicked a small metal pipe, not even bothering to see where it went. He just wanted to kick it. My dad's the strongest person in the world. And my mom has a decent quirk. And what do I get out of that? Izuku clenched his fist and gritted his teeth. He already knew the answer. Nothing. I didn't get anything out of it. Izuku grabbed a rock and chugged it in the water. He wiped his eyes of tears and looked ahead. He saw clean and clear water. Izuku's eyes widened when he realized that there were no ripples in the water. The only way that would have happened was if Izuku picked up another rock from the sand. This time he kept his eyes focused directly forward as he geared up his arm, moving it back and getting ready. He tossed the rock. Izuku watched with joyful and disbelieving eyes as the rock shot across the sky. It flew for miles and miles. Izuku lost track of how far away the rock went. He didn't even know landed in the water. They're here. Izuku had to say it to himself again in order to believe it. They were finally here. I got my powers. I got my powers. Izuku immediately turned around to run home. He had to tell his parents. His dad would be so happy. Izuku was so happy himself that he didn't realize how fast he was moving. Anything interesting, Hisashi? Not really. They do have my morning workout here though. Hisashi was sitting at the kitchen table, a newspaper in his hands. It was a habit he had formed after learning to read Japanese. It was a relaxing setting he had come to enjoy. Would cook dinner while he would sit and read. So fighting a giant monster is a workout for you? Well, it is one of two possible workouts, Hisashi said with a sly grin as his eyes took in his wife's slim form. Since Izuku isn't here, we can discuss it if you'd like. Maybe bring this up when I'm not cooking, Hisashi, Inko said with false annoyance. Besides, our son is due any minute now. You wouldn't want him to walk in on us. Would you? Well, maybe if he saw us, he would dash. Hisashi was cut off when the front door was thrown open. Izuku ran inside the house, an impenetrable smile on his face and light on his feet. I got my powers. I finally got them. Hisashi looked to his wife for a moment before turning to Izuku. His face was placid. Are you sure? Izuku frowned. He had expected a more excited reaction. Yes. I mean, I just threw a pipe at the sky. I think it crossed the ocean. Inko lightly kicked her husband's leg to send him the message. Oh. That's great, son. Hisashi said a little too quickly. Tell you what. I'll call off of work for tomorrow. And I'll call your school to let them know you won't be showing up. Wheel the day on starting your training. Really? Of course. With your powers finally here, who else can train you to use them? And it's better to get started as soon as possible. I'd suggest eating first, Inko interrupted. Wouldn't want to fly on an empty stomach now, would you? I certainly don't want to. And you, son? Izuku, who hadn't eaten in hours, nodded vigorously. And as he ate with his family, his mind wandered to what tomorrow could bring. He couldn't wait. Izuku couldn't sleep. He tried to, but the excitement of what he would be doing tomorrow kept him from being able to rest. He would finally be able to train with his father, using powers that he had spent the past 15 years waiting for them. And now he had them. Izuku knew he was fast and strong now. But there was still one power he hadn't tried out yet. One that his father said they would be focusing on extensively tomorrow. Flight. Izuku had seen his father flying for years. He made it look easy. But when Izuku thought about it, he realized that he had no idea how he would even start to think about doing except that he was doing it right now. Izuku couldn't feel the pillow under his head anymore. He couldn't feel the mattress on his back. Turning his head slightly, Izuku could see the bed underneath him. He was float above it. Whoa! Izuku didn't have any other words to describe how he felt. It was an exhilarating feeling. Even if he was only above his bed. But it did raise one question. How do I dash? Izuku suddenly lost his momentum and fell back on the bed. UMPH. His head back on the pillow, Izuku shuffled a bit as he got used to gravity affecting him again. Now he really couldn't wait. The next morning. You up yet? Izuku woke up to see his father standing at his door, dressed in full costume. Which was weird to Izuku. He was used to seeing his father, sure. But he also associated the costume with the way his father's seen on TV. Stay in bed any longer, we might miss the sun. I thought you wanted to fly today? I do. Just let me get changed, Dad. Hisashi chuckled. I'll wait at the door, Izuku. Don't keep me waiting too long. With his father gone, Izuku put on the best clothes he had for training like this. Which happened to be a gray hoodie and a pair of green sweatpants. He quickly ran outside seeing his mother sitting in the living room. Will you be alright, sweetie? I'll be fine, Mom. I'll be with Dad. Alright. Have fun. I will. Bye. Izuku quickly went outside. His dad was waiting for him at the ledge. Are you ready? Izuku had to take several deep breaths to calm himself down. He still had trouble believing that this was happening. Yeah, I think so. Good. Follow me then. Hisashi floated up off the balcony to the apartment. He was waiting for Izuku to follow him. Wait. We're doing this here? But public quirk usage is illegal without a license. Hisashi just chuckled. You need to relax a little, Izuku. You won't be able to fly if you're too stiff. And besides, I applied to get you a flying license back when you were born. Izuku's eyes widened. Really? When I was born? I didn't know at what age your powers would manifest, so I decided to get it early. You're free to fly so long as a pro hero, which in this case is me, is supervising you. Now get to the ground so I can see what I'm working with. Izuku didn't have any reason to keep his dad waiting. If he really did have a license for him, then it was time to learn to fly. With that in mind, Izuku took his feet off the ground. He tried to remember how he felt last night. Weightless, but balanced. The air would carry him, but he could push himself in the direction he needed to go. And right now, he was right next to his father. Okay, you got the first step done. Take off. Now we just need to work on everything else, Hisashi said as he turned his body around. Fly after me. Let's see how well you can keep Hisashi off to the east, and Izuku struggles to keep up with him. It was one thing to float above your own bed. It was a completely different endeavor to try and fly after a person who had at least decades of experience flying. Izuku had to constantly push himself to try and even keep up with his father, who seemed to not even be putting much effort into a float. Flying is like a muscle, Izuku. It's good to relax that muscle from time to time. Let the momentum you build up carry you through the air instead of constantly pushing yourself. Izuku flew faster past Hisashi, which concerned the man a little bit, even though he was able to quickly catch up. Okay. Think of it like taking baby steps. It was hard when you were a toddler, but eventually, you were able to walk without thinking. Flying makes very little difference. You're just in it. Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Think of it like peeing your pants on purpose, Hisashi said with a grin. A grin that grew when Izuku's face was flabbergasted. What? Peeing your pants on purpose. It's something that you spend your entire life avoiding. So if someone asked you to do it on the spot, you wouldn't be able to, Hisashi explained, spend your entire life on the ground. You feel like you belong on the earth. Because of that, asking you to relax in the air feels impossible. Why would you make a comparison to peeing your pants? How would you even come up with that? Follow me, Hisashi said without answering Izuku's question. Let's land on the beach down here. Hisashi started to descend towards the beach. From the corner of his eye, he could see Izuku struggling. Son, you need to relax. Calm down. Izuku could barely hear his father through all the air passing his ears as he descended to the ground. I can't. Land. Son, stop. He didn't. Izuku flailed and yelled as he fell on the junk pile on the beach. He ended up creating a crater on impact. Hisashi landed next to the crater and waited for Izuku to come ugh. Izuku groaned as he pulled himself out of the hole. I think I'm fine. That didn't hurt. That's good. Just don't get used to it, Hisashi said as he took a look around the beach. It was mostly empty thanks to the trash. No bystanders. And the junk might be useful. Let's try something different. Try to hit me. Izuku's eyes bulged. Was this for real? Seriously? Yeah. Let's see how much strength we have to work with. If I can feel it, that means you're on the right track. Go ahead. Hisashi was smiling, so Izuku figured he felt secure in what he was saying. And Izuku had seen his father get hit with a lot of heavy stuff and come out fine. So this shouldn't be a problem. With that in mind, Izuku balled his hand into a fist and tossed it at his father, who dodged it easily. I thought I asked you to hit me, Izuku. Are you going to do it? Frowning, Izuku made another fist and launched it at his father. Again, he missed. You're not going to hit me with just your fist, Izuku, Hisashi said as he stepped off the ground and floated a few feet away from Izuku. But if you add your hip, your shoulder, rest of your arm to the attack, you'll have a better chance. And remember, we don't have to worry about building momentum for an attack. We can pivot off of any point to strike and can literally build our own momentum. Izuku decided to take his father's advice. He took his feet off the ground. He then tried using his entire body to power his attack. He was still missing, but he was getting closer. Good. Keep that up. But try something like this. Like what, Dad? In response, Hisashi shot a fist directly into Izuku's chest. One that instantly knocked the wind right out of Izuku's lungs. HRRK, Izuku felt the air in his lungs being trapped by the hit. It took him a moment to be able to breathe normally again. But even then, he had to crumble on the ground due to pain in his chest. The whole time Izuku was struggling on the ground, Hisashi was floating above him, tearing down on his son with critical eyes. He did not seem pleased. Dad, that hurt. Suddenly, Hisashi's face shifted to one of concern. He knelt down on the ground next to his son, grabbing a hold of his shoulder to help balance him. I'm sorry, son. I should have held back a bit more on that punch. But it is a part of the lesson. The lesson? Izuku questioned with a hoarse voice. Izuku, if you really want to do what I do, then you'll need to learn to take hits like these. Worse ones even. Because the people and things you'll end up fighting, they won't pee punches the way I will. Later. Inko wasn't used to being all alone in her house. Usually she had her husband to keep her company while Izuku was at school or hanging out somewhere. And if not, then Izuku at home while Hisashi was out doing his work or exercising on the moon. So being alone while both of them were out was a little strange to her. But she had a feeling it was something she would have to get used to. Even if having no one to talk to als having little to do. Right now, she was entertaining herself by looking back on her old family photos. She had a few from when she left home and said goodbye to her parents. But most of them her husband and son. She still had the newspaper clipping from the day she met Hisashi. The day he saved her from being crushed by a flying truck. He was still wearing that weird white outfit of his. Had said that it was a Viltrumite uniform, but it always looked a little silly to her. There were pictures from after they got married too. Their wedding had been interesting, mostly because Hisashi had no idea what to do and almost got into a fight with the photographer. It was honestly a little endearing how protective he got at times. She had a photo of when Izuku was born. That was one of the only times she had even seen Hisashi nervous. He had been pacing around the entire hospital that day. He probably would have flown laps around the planet if he had decided to stay in the building. Throughout the pictures, it was easy to see how little Hisashi changed, physically. Aside from the goatee he grew to complement his mustache, his looks were stagnant. The sand-black hair he passed on to Izuku, through her son's had streaks of her green color, and the same gray eyes. He had said something about how little his people physically changed. Just as she was going to see more pictures, the door opened. Both her husband and son came in, both in regular clothes. Welcome back. How did it go? Inko saw her son's shoulders slumped. And her husband was rigid. Something went wrong. It was fine, Mom. I'll be in my room. Izuku ran into his room faster than Inko could respond. So it was clear that his powers had manifested. So she had to turn to her husband. Hisashi. What happened out there? Nothing major. We just trained. Inko could tell by the scowl on his face that he was lying. Why don't you just tell me the truth, Hisashi? What actually happened out there? Nothing important. I just pushed him a little more than he was used to, Hisashi told his wife. He was going to sit down in the kitchen, but Inko stood in his way. You pushed him? Is it possible that you went just a little too far? Inko, with all due respect, this is Viltrumite business. You wouldn't understand. Inko returned a scowl back at her own husband. Viltrumite business? Hisashi, in case you hadn't noticed, your son wasn't born on your planet. He was born on Earth, among humans, Inko scolded her husband. Did it ever occur to you that training your son as one of your people wouldn't work? He wasn't born on Viltrum. Hisashi was going to retort, but the response died in his throat. All he could do was scrunch his face as he conceded to his wife. No. I hadn't considered that. It's just... Izuku got his powers so late. I wasn't prepared. Not like I should have been, Hisashi admitted as he sat down at the kitchen table. Teaching him the way I was taught might be best. I hadn't considered that he might be different. Inko sat down and grabbed her husband's hand. He looks up to you, Hisashi. More than you realize. You just need a better way to connect with him. I'm sure this will all work out in the end. I hope so, Inko, Hisashi said with a serious tone. I really do. Inside his room, Izuku was trying his best to keep himself from crying. It wasn't so much that he was sad. He was just disappointed in himself for how the day went. He had expected learning to fly with Dad to be an amazing experience. Something he would remember for the rest of his life. And he would. But not for the reasons he had hoped. He was still rubbing his chest for light pain. Hisashi's last lesson was something that Izuku couldn't get out of his mind. His father was right, fighting villains was something that would obviously involve taking a lot of hits. Seen the aftermath of a few villain attacks, and the heroes didn't always look their best afterward. Still, it was a hard lesson to swallow. And Izuku was still coming to terms with it. I didn't know it at the time, but my father was right. Being a hero meant I would have to take a lot of hits. It came with the job. I just wish I knew then how many hits I would end up taking. Knock knock, wake up Izuku. I'm here to make it up to you. Huh? Dad? The door opened, letting Hisashi come into Izuku's room. He was still in civilian clothes, and he looked less disappointed than earlier. Okay. I think we can both admit that training did not go according to plan. It's okay, Dad. You were trying to teach me a lesson. I was trying to teach you. And I should have focused on teaching. Not hurting you, Hisashi admitted without hesitation. I'm not going to say what I did was wrong. I just should have done it so soon. You've only had your power for a day, and I shouldn't have expected you to understand so soon. Probably should have waited until next week. At least. Hisashi sighed as he sat down next to his son. I think we both need to figure out how this will work. I thought you had a training plan set out. I thought I did. But after talking with your mother, I realized that I really can't teach you the way I was taught, Hisashi admitted. Even before I got my powers, Viltrumite Val discipline were already being drilled into me. Preparing me for the day that would be able to contribute more fully to society. Hisashi gently held his son's shoulder. You weren't raised the same way I was. Your mother wanted you raised as a human, and I didn't have it in me to say no. Otherwise I was started training you on the moon the moment your powers kicked on. Is there a space station on the moon? Not that I know of. And we wouldn't need one anyway. Izuku's eyes widened. What? Something to teach you about later. My point is, I need to revise the entire strategy one had set out, Hisashi informed his son. I thought I could use the same training plan I all knew, but it's clear that it won't work. Because of that, we'll need to figure out our own plan. Our own plan? How do we make it? I think we're already off to be a better start. We're having a conversation, Hisashi commented. You tell me, son. What do you think we should focus on training right now? Izuku wanted to respond quickly, but he had to take a moment to think about it. And the more he thought, the more he realized something. I've only had my powers for about a day. I still don't know which of them I'm best with or worse with. I need to know more about my powers before I can make any judgment. Izuku rubbed his chest. Though I can probably work on becoming more durable. It's a start, Hisashi added. In truth, he had about as much of an idea of how to help Izuku as Izuku did. But as he had said, it was a start. And when Hisashi saw the open notebook on Izuku's desk, he realized that there was something he could help his son with. Coming up with a costume? Izuku's eyes brightened when his father brought it up. Yeah. I'm trying to come up with something that works. Something that would show people the kind of hero I want to be. Hisashi stared at his son. Okay. What kind of hero do you want to be? All Might is the hero that brings hope to people with his smile. He makes them all feel safe. You do that too. The fact that you use your powers to protect them makes them feel they have nothing to worry about. Izuku took a breath. I want to do that too. Both of you are the best heroes in the world. I want to be like that too. Hisashi smirked. His son's idealism might not be normal, but it was boundless. And Hisashi had to wonder where it came from. Still, it was nice. It's nice to know my own son thinks highly of me. And if I see All Might, I'll be sure to let him know. Hisashi picked up the notebook and held it in front of Izuku. But more on the topic at hand. You have an idea of what kind of costume you want. Why don't we hammer out the details and get it made? Izuku's eyes widened. We can do that? But I thought you had to be in a hero school for that. I know someone who could make it. And besides, why not have it done ahead of time? Give yourself an advantage over those people you'd be in class with. But what if I don't make it in? Izuku, if they really want capable people out there protecting innocence, they'd have to be stupid to turn you away. Especially after we train you to get stronger. So what do Izuku's mood was now a full 180 turn from what it had been just an hour earlier. His first lesson with his dad hadn't gone great, but now they were figuring out how to fix the issue. They could make a foundation for future training sessions to go better. Even better, his dad was helping him to get a hero costume months before he would even apply to UA. That was because he believed that Izuku would make it in. And if things go out, he would. Right now, Izuku felt like things would work out for the better. One bad day wouldn't bring him down. Island Hisashi had to admit, for a species centuries behind his own people, humans were on the right track to catch up. It would still take a long time, but they were on the right track. This island is a prime example. While still far from complete, the potential it held for the development of mankind as a species could not be disputed. All the best scientists and technology in one place. Definitely wasn't anything to scoff at. As soon as Hisashi was close to the one building that housed the person he came to see, he began his quick descent. The security system was up to date yet, so he had no trouble walking inside. And even if security was there, they would calm down once they saw what he was wearing. The power of a uniform. Once Hisashi had made it to the lab he had come to visit, he knocked. Who is it? Hisashi smirked. I don't know, David. Who else would fly hundreds of miles in a few minutes just to see you? Hisashi heard some rustling inside the room before the door burst open. A man with disheveled brown hair and glasses came out. Hisashi? Hey, David. How are you doing? Oh, I'm fine, Hisashi. But what are you doing here? The Viltrumite raised a brow. Are you okay, David? You sound a little worried. Is this a bad time? David immediately composed himself. No. Sorry, I just wasn't expecting you today. What can I do for you? Hisashi kept his eyebrow raised but still took the blueprints from his pocket. I was wondering if I could ask a favor from you. Curious, David took the paper from Hisashi. He read the design, only to be left confused. Okay, this is obviously not for you. So, why would you ask me to make a hero costume for someone else? Especially a kid. Because that kid is my son. The new surprise almost gave David a heart attack. You your son? I didn't even know you had a wife. It's part of the deal I made with the U.N when I came to the planet. I help deal with the disasters normal heroes can't, and in exchange, I get to keep my privacy. Hisashi EXP. My son's powers hadn't come in, so I decided to keep his existence quiet until he could defend himself. I didn't want any enemies coming after him. David wasn't sure how to take this information. He knew that he and Hisashi weren't exactly friends, but he never expected the man to this secretive. Then again, Hisashi wasn't okay. I'm guessing your son will want a costume so he can try to be a hero? David asked with a slightly hopeful undertone to his voice. Yeah. He actually wants to try out for you. If you can believe it. Toshi's school? This caused David to pause. If Hisashi's son wanted to go there, then maybe there was a chance. I think so. I'll be honest and say that I don't usually keep up with hero facts. My son memorizes more than enough of those for me, Hisashi reminisced with a chuckle. Do you can make it? Ha? Oh sure, David quickly said. This shouldn't be a problem, I could have it made within a week easily. Thanks. Let me know how I can make it up to you, David. I'll see you around. As Hisashi left, David quickly closed the door and went back to his computer. He left the blueprint on his desk to work on another day. Right now, he was busy opening up the file on Earth's only outside resident. The file had all of Omni-man's known powers and abilities listed. Weaknesses were still empty, but there was another subfolder to open. Second Viltrumite. Last week. Christopher, we need to talk. Not now, Pamela. What was that, Donald? Christopher Skyline, better known as Captain Celebrity, was talking with his manager over the phone. He was trying to move the children's school visit to next week so he could have a reality TV quota. He was just one away from meeting 20. So long as he stayed in public knowledge, his spot in the ranking wouldn't change. He was the U.S. #1 for a reason. He was the best hero in America. He was. I'm pregnant, Christopher. Skyline's cheek grin suddenly morphed into a shocked frown. He couldn't even hear what Donald was saying over the phone anymore. And he was noticing. Chris, you alright? I heard Pamela did something. I'll call you back, Donald. What? But Chris, Skyline hung up the phone as he tried to process what he was feeling. His constant blinking, stammering, and shuffling his feet made it clear how difficult it was for him. Pamela, you're pregnant. That's great. We can dash and I'm leaving. Skyline almost choked. What? Pamela, we're having a baby. We dash I am having your baby, Christopher. But it is clear to me that I cannot trust you to raise it with me. Can't trust me? Pamela, I'm the #1 U.S. hero. You can trust me. I can only trust you for a few things, Christopher, Pamela said almost bitterly. Mostly with disappointment. I can trust you to never come home from those parties. I can trust chase every skirt that catches your eye. I can trust you to spend your days laughing it up with talk show hosts and reporters rather than being here with me. Pamela. Skyline tried to find a response. He couldn't think of a good one. The more he tried to think of a retort, the more he realized he didn't have one. I can't trust you, Christopher, no matter how much I might love you. I can't stay. Pamela turned to leave. A small part of Skyline almost wanted to let her go. She was right. He hadn't been doing what he needed to do. Not for her. Maybe she would be better without him. But the rest of Skyline didn't agree. And he grabbed a hold of her arm. Pamela, wait. Let me just make one promise. A promise? Christopher, you've broken every promise you've made to me since we got married. I know. So I won't make this promise to you. I'll make it to the baby. Pamela was a little taken aback by the declaration. She hadn't been expecting that. The baby hasn't been born, so I haven't disappointed it yet. Let me keep that up, Skyline pleaded. I'll stop chasing women. I will take a class for it if you want. I'll stop going so much. Normally, such a promise would hurt Skyline. But right now, it didn't. Please, I'll do whatever you want, Pamela. I don't want to be absent from my own kid's life. Pamela knew that last part was personal. For reasons that Christopher didn't like to talk about. But she didn't know if she could trust that. Christopher had gone back to her before. He was a good hero, but being a husband was where he had failed. But he has one thing right. He hadn't failed their child. One last chance, Christopher. The pro hero's eyes widened behind his goggles. They were more joyful than Pamela had seen them in a long time. Thank you. Thank you so much, Pamela. I promise you won't regret this. Skyline enveloped his wife in a tight hug. She might have her reservations, but he had every intention of doing this right. He knew that he wasn't a great husband. He knew that people thought his actions disqualified him from being the #1 hero. Not without complete reason. And he knew that someone was always doubting, no matter how much he put into what he did. Part of the reason he had become a hero was to show that he could do it. None of that mattered to him right now. He was going to be a father. That was one thing he couldn't mess up. Now. These memories from last week and more thoughts and more were running through Skyline's head as he walked to the edge of his personal yacht. He wondered if keeping this overcompensation for something. He was beginning to think it might be. Are you sure you want to do this alone, celebrity? We would be glad to send a drone with you. It's fine, Jeffrey. I want to be alone right now. I have a lot on my mind. Receiving a nod from Jeffrey, Captain Celebrity, America's #1 hero, took off to the ocean sky. He left his yacht behind nearer to the shore of New York. What he had to manage was true. He wanted to be alone right now. Captain Celebrity did not get scared. He might get nervous in a fight. He might get anxious over an interview. But he didn't get scared. He didn't. It wouldn't fit his image, so he got scared. He didn't. He didn't get scared. He was scared. Pamela was pregnant. With his son, as he now knew. Christopher Skyline was going to be a dad. The irresponsible Playboy hero was going to be a father. Former irresponsible Playboy hero, Skyline mentally reminded himself. He needed to keep that in the past. There was a reason he was flying over the Atlantic Ocean instead of the beach he frequented. He needed time to be alone and to think. This was going to be a major change. Being a dad meant he needed to make some major changes to himself. He couldn't be a playboy anymore. He needed to set a better example for his child. At least a better one own old man had given him. He might also have to make fewer TV appearances. And definitely keep his son out of the limelight. But despite his worries, Skyline felt good. He and his ex-wife might not see to eye anymore, but he was sure they could put their differences aside if it meant ensuring that they would grow up all right. How knows, maybe they could even work things out. It was optimistic, but Skyline liked to think positively. Christopher. Jumping, Skyline turned around to see someone floating behind him. The first thing he noticed was the O symbol on his chest. Omni-man? What are you doing here? Skyline wasn't exactly friends with Omni-man. The two had worked together, and Skyline had tried to start conversations about more team-ups, but the powerhouse usually signed and flew away. He never knew why. And that made his sudden appearance here all the more confusing. I heard about Pamela. Congratulations. Oh. Thank you, Skyline said, genuinely surprised. He never expected Omni-Man to suddenly approach him over something like this. Forgive me if this sounds rude, but I didn't want to see you about this. I thought you wouldn't care. Normally I wouldn't. But as a husband and father myself, I thought I could reach out. You have a kid? Skyline was getting a lot of surprises this week. Yeah. I am a teenager, actually. He's at that age. A teenager? How come you've never mentioned it? At least, I haven't heard anything about this. I like to keep things private. And besides, my son is a late bloomer. He's only recently started to show signs of his powers. Just recently? That is late, Skyline admitted. Hey, since you've raised him this far, could you offer me some advice? Of course. I did say I came here to reach out. Skyline smiled as he drifted closer to Omni-Man. Thank you. I've been really nervous about this whole thing. Maybe this can dash splat. Skyline's breath stopped when he heard the noise. He registered the sound before he felt the pain. Looking down, he saw what it was. Omni-man's fist was lodged inside his chest. Right where his lungs were. Warehouse, why? Blood spilled from Skyline's mouth as he struggled to breathe, let alone speak. Omni-man had not destroyed his lungs, but his fist was so close as to rupture them. His fist had gone through him like paper, and there wasn't anything he could do about it. I doubt anyone will miss you. But I should make sure that no evidence remains. Grabbing a hold of Skyline's shoulder and pulling out the bloody fist, Omni-man took towards the sky, dragging the Skyline with him. The #1 American pro-hero was helpless to do anything as Omni-man forced him higher to the sky. He couldn't even scream or make any noise as he was pulled higher above his limit. Even when he could fly normally, he had to stop before the air got too thin. Omni-man showed no care or mercy to Captain Celebrity as the two of them went higher and higher. The force caused Skyline to lose consciousness as they approached the star Earth's atmosphere. Once they reached it, the problem of Skyline's body took care of itself. The heat of the atmosphere soon burned his body within seconds. There wasn't even a shred of a piece of physics that took over. Omni-man looked at his hand when he felt the loss of weight occur. The American hero was disintegrated, leaving no trace that he had ever even lived. Even more, passing through the atmosphere burned away the blood that had been on his hand, destroying any evidence that might exist of what had just happened. Omni-man released out a sigh as he let the moment pass. That's done. Turning back to the planet, the caped Viltrumite rocketed towards Japan. Having just felt the closeness of the sun's rays, it was noticeable when he entered Japan, now in the inn. But that didn't bother him. He was used to seeing changes when he entered back to the surface of a planet. He descended until he reached the family apartment. Omni-man stepped at the front door. Hisashi walked through it. I'm back. Dad. Izuku went towards his father. Hisashi was pleased to see Izuku levitating above the ground. Putting in some practice? Yeah. Trying to make staying in the air easier and more natural for myself. Izuku explained. How did it go? Hisashi smiled. Give it about a week. You'll have a costume ready long before you even step at that school's gates. Izuku's smile was wide enough to envelop his entire face. Hisashi was shocked when his son wrapped his arms around him and buried his face in his shoulder. Thank you, Dad. Thank you so much. Smiling much more softly, Hisashi returned the hug. You're welcome, son. I hope this makes up for earlier, Hisashi said as the two let go. Now why don't you go and rest? We'll pick back up tomorrow as soon as you get home from school. All right. See you, Dad. Inko walked in just as Izuku closed himself into his room. She noticed the smile on her son's face. I take it you were able to fix things? Yes. Things should be right on track now, Hisashi said as he hugged his wife. A pleasantly surprised wife. Oh. Getting a little excited, Hisashi? Just showing my gratitude. I wouldn't have been able to fix things without your help. Hisashi let his face glide closer to Inko's. I could show you my gratitude in another way if you'd like. Inko blushed slightly, but she didn't back away. Izuku is awake. He might hear us. I sent him to get ready for training tomorrow. There is not a chance he'll be listening. Are you sure? Would I suggest it if I wasn't? As Inko led her husband back to their room, the Viltrumite felt good. Maybe things could work out after all. That's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this part. If you want more, like this video, hit that notification bell, and maybe even give a comment on your thoughts on the video. With that being said, I'll see you all in the next part.